Ambassador Kirk, welcome to the Ronald Reagan Building and International Trade Center.
Andrew, thank you for having me. And again, let me thank you and the Reagan Center for hosting USTR for our 50th anniversary celebration.
That was our pleasure. I thought USTR and WITA put together an absolutely beautiful event, and it's wonderful to see you back here, taking some time to talk to us today.
It was a great event, and I want to thank both WITA and the Chamber. And as we were talking off camera a little bit, one of the real special things about USTR, being as young and as small as we are, it's a great fraternity of alumni. And I tell people, having been involved in public service for the larger part of my adult life, the neat thing about USTR, it's nonpartisan. It's not bipartisan. It is as nonpartisan of environment as you'll get to work in. So it makes it a real special place to work and a great fraternity of USTR alums.
And that's actually a nice segue. You mentioned public service. You were a big city mayor in Dallas, and you're spending,
You just had to get that Dallas. Okay.
Maybe I could try it again.
No.
As a former big city mayor, looking through that lens for a minute, what do free trade agreements mean to the small and mid-sized companies that you're so familiar with?
Well, the interesting and remarkable thing that you would start there is I was elected mayor in June of 1995. NAFTA went into effect, I think, January of 95. And having been privileged to serve as Secretary of State under Governor Ann Richards, we were intimately, passionately supportive of NAFTA. And so during, the myriad of campaign events I had to do, we were all pressed on our economic development initiative. And my answer was NAFTA. This is a gift to a city like Dallas, located in the center of the United States, halfway between Mexico and Canada. And for a city like ours, it was very easy for us to understand the economic benefits that could accrue to our region, and particularly our smaller businesses, because one, for us, the issue of proximity just wasn't as big a deal for them. And so it wasn't as intimidating for a lot of our small business to think about doing business with Mexico and Canada. But one of the things we did was we created a competition with our chamber that rewarded our small business who was most actively involved in exporting and paid for them to then participate in broader international trade initiatives. But my bias as a mayor is if you want to create jobs, investing in small businesses is a good place to start. These are businesses whose first intuition isn't to pick up and move to China or Mexico. They're going to grow in Washington, in Detroit, in Dallas, and whatever we can do to demystify this world of international trade for them, I think can have huge upsides to us as we seek to use exports as a way to help fuel our economic recovery.
You mentioned it seems that the administration after 2008 turned to exports as a primary way to take the economy to the next level, to lead it out of the recession. Can you tell us a little bit about the National Export Initiative?
Well, we did, and one of the reasons I was so pleased to be entrusted with this unique portfolio was from the very beginning, the president understood that sort of a missed opportunity for the United States, or one of the open shots that he and I like to, since we use so much basketball parlance, available to America to kind of help fuel our economic recovery, was to take advantage of the fact that 95% of the world's consumers now live somewhere other than the United States, but people around the world still very much value any product grown, made, created, innovated that says made in America. And so we understood that if we could build a more credible case to the American public, that being involved in global commerce, taking advantage of trade, could be a tool to help spur economic growth, create jobs, and not just the consumptive benefits that Americans have come to entrust with it. So with that, the president, as you know, challenged us to see if we couldn't double our exports in 4 years. And that's never been done before. That was a huge leap. But recognizing that we were coming out of a global economic recession, trade tends to recover more quickly. And as I think you know, because of the incredible research you all do here at the Reagan Center. Those first 2 years, we were moving along at a pace well ahead of that necessary to meet that goal. With the slowdown in the recovery, we're having to be a little more thoughtful. But the good news is the Department of Commerce, I think, estimates that roughly 1.2 million jobs have been associated with our increased exports over the last 3 years. Certainly agriculture is doing well. Manufactured goods are doing well. The service economy is a huge opportunity for us, but we need to be even more aggressive and thoughtful about getting more businesses involved in the power of exports as a way to fuel growth and job creation.
A subject that you know very well, in 2011, Congress passed free trade agreements with Korea, Colombia, and Panama. The Korean and Colombian agreements are already in effect. What are some of the early findings from those agreements?
Well, the combined benefit to our economy of the agreements with Korea, Panama, and Colombia, which we passed a little over a year ago on October 11th, and I think it was October 21st when the president signed them into law. Again, the three of those has the ability to generate over 70,000 jobs. With Korea, which went into effect in March, we saw an immediate uptick in our exports. Now, admittedly, we've seen a larger uptick in imports, but about 2/3 of what we shipped to Korea became duty-free immediately. Over 95% of it will become duty-free over the next 3 to 5 years. The same thing with Colombia. Our exports are up almost 14%. But you know, the net effect, I guess the bottom line, we're selling more at lower prices into these two markets, which makes everything we sell to them that much more competitive.
And I'm just curious about the timeline for the implementation on the Panama Agreement.
Passing the trade agreement is one element.
Right.
In most cases, because our market is so open, and most of our laws are already in place, the United States rarely has to do very little in terms of changing our laws to accommodate another country's interest in trading with us. In many cases, when we do a trade agreement, we're lowering their tariffs and barriers, asking them to increase their level of everything from intellectual property rights to labor and environmental laws. So then they have to subsequently go make those legislative changes before the agreement comes into force. The good news is we brought Korea and Colombia on pace as quickly as any trade agreements we've done before. It can take anywhere from 6 months to 2 years. But our goal was to have all three into force within a year. We've obviously met that with Colombia and Korea. We're on pace to do that with Panama as well, and we hope to have some very good news on that in the very near future. But we've been working very, very diligently with our colleagues in Panama to put the final touches on a handful of legislative items they need to address.
You've mentioned in recent remarks that the TransPacific Partnership negotiations are ongoing. I'm just curious, what was the impetus for the partnership and what are the objectives for the multilateral agreement?
Well, if I want to try to make this as plain as I can. The world of global trade is really not that much different as commerce in Dallas or Maine or Detroit. The number one rule, at least of retail business for 100 years, has been location, location, location. You know, you go, you buy one franchise, you open a successful sandwich shop, ice cream parlor, car wash, and you make money and you decide, well, I want to open another one. The first rule is, where are there the most customers who can afford my service? And so the president challenged us as part of this broader export initiative. Let's really look at those markets. Let's look at the globe, that 95% of consumers outside of the U.S. But where are the markets most receptive to America? Where are the markets in which we're beginning to see more and more people move out of poverty and have the wherewithal to afford what we can buy? And just about every major economic analysis over the last 36 months identifies an area broadly described as the Asia Pacific as one of the fastest growing regions in the world. For that reason, President Obama wisely realized that the United States should take advantage of being a Pacific nation, just as we have been our Atlantic partnership, say, with Europe over the last 50 years. And so within that, was born this Trans-Pacific Partnership. It grew out of APEC, which is the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperative. It's 21 economies in the Asia-Pacific region that work collaboratively on trade initiatives. 9 of those countries initially bounded together and said, under a common goal of creating a very high standard next generation trade agreement. The United States agreed to be a part of that partnership in 2009, and we have been working toward achieving that ambition over the last 24 months.
Several of us were recently in Moscow for the General Assembly meeting for the World Trade Center Association. While we were there, we met with numerous government officials who were enthusiastic about Russia's accession into the WTO. Can you tell us what this means for U.S. businesses?
Well, we think there are probably 3 dimensions, all positive, to Russia now becoming the largest economy in the world that was not a part of the World Trade Organization, now being a part of a rules-based global system. The first was the one you mentioned. It's a huge consumer market and potentially a very important market for the United States as Russia looks, frankly, to diversify their economy from being so dependent on export of petroleum goods and looking at other goods. They have a need for machinery and for cars and technology and agriculture products, all of which we would be happy to supply. We have had a bilateral trade agreement with Russia for 10 to 15 years, but it's somewhat limited in its scope. It doesn't cover the full range of products and services that Russia is now opening up as part of its WTO covenants. So the second benefit is we would have much broader access to Russia's market than we have just under our current bilateral trade relationship. And then finally, as Russia transitions from a very closed, challenged economy, some would say, I would say it politely, there are going to be difficulties. And in the past, many of our businesses have encountered, frankly, a great deal of challenges getting into Russia's market because of unpredictability, a lack of transparency, in some cases corruption under the old system. One of the key strengths of Russia being in the World Trade Organization, one of the real values to American businesses is we now have access to the World Trade Organization's dispute resolution system.
While we're talking about WTO, I'd probably be remiss if I didn't ask you what some of the important issues that you're facing and your staff is facing with regards to China.
Well, there are a couple of things. China is, the relationship between China and the United States, as you know, is potentially one of the most beneficial to the United States and the global economy, but it certainly is also going to be one of our most challenging. Henry Kissinger once spoke at a conference I hosted, since you mentioned my having been mayor. We used to host an international forum, and Kissinger spoke to us, and he challenged the audience and reminded us to never underestimate the difficulties of sitting across the table from someone who measured time in dynasties versus think about the United States, in which your girls and my girls think it's a big deal that they've got the I-4 and not the I-5, because we think that 4G, 3G difference makes. And to China's credit, in the 10 years they've been a part of the World Trade Organization, they've made enormous strides to open up their economy, and our trade reflects that. But we can't ignore the reality that China also felt like they kind of hit a wall a few years ago, and they've decided they enjoy selling their goods to the world much more than they do opening up their economy. And part of our responsibility at USTR, part of that conversation I had with the president about us fully exploiting the benefits of trade to the American public's advantage, is that we not only have to be excited about opening up new markets, we have to do one simple thing. We've got to say to all of our partners, including China, you got to play by the rules. And so one of the commitments we made was that we would hold China accountable to live up to all the commitments it made as a member of the World Trade Organization, and where they don't, that we would enforce the rights to protect the interests of America's workers and our manufacturers. And that's what we've done on a very consistent basis. That's what we'll continue to do so.
Ambassador Kirk, before we conclude, do you have any other information you'd like to share with our viewers?
I would only add what I said. I know we covered a lot. We used a lot of acronyms, but this is some very dynamic work going, and it is a marvelous opportunity to help us fuel our American recovery by taking advantage of the opportunity to sell goods that say made in America to consumers around the world. And if any of your viewers want to learn more about what we're doing, I would invite them to visit ustr.gov. If there are any businesses who are watching and maybe we pick their interest about what we can do to assist them, I would invite them to visit either our website or export.gov so we think we can help them to understand how they can grow their business through the power of exports.
I suppose with that, I'll end to a conclusion here. So, Ambassador Kirk, thank you so much for spending some time talking to me today at the Ronald Reagan Building and International Trade Center. I know you're a very busy man, and I really appreciated it.
Andrew, thank you so much for having us. And again, thank you for your hospitality and hosting us for our 50th celebration.
I hope to see you back at the Ronald Reagan Building and International Trade Center soon. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.